What if I told you that somewhere in a small town in Oregon, a woman spent the last 15 years of her life living in absolute terror of her telephone? What if I told you that every call she received came from herself, but from 20 years in the past? And what if I told you that these calls weren't just impossible coincidences, but detailed warnings about tragedies that had already destroyed her life? This is the story of Margaret Holloway, a woman who claimed that her younger self was desperately trying to save her from a future that had already come to pass. A story so disturbing that it challenges everything we think we know about time, consciousness, and the price of knowledge. Margaret Holloway was 62 years old when she first contacted paranormal investigators in 2008. She was a retired librarian living alone in Bend, Oregon, in a house that had been in her family for 3 generations. By all accounts, she had lived a quiet, unremarkable life until 1993, when everything changed forever. According to Margaret's detailed journals, which were discovered after her death, the first call came on a Tuesday evening. In March, she was washing dishes when her old rotary phone rang. The voice on the other end was unmistakably hers, but younger, more vibrant, filled with an urgency that made her blood run cold. "Margaret, this is you. This is you, from 1973. I know you won't believe me, but you have to listen. Tomorrow, Wednesday, March 17th. Don't let Tommy ride his bicycle to school, please. Whatever you do, keep him inside." Margaret hung up immediately, convinced it was some cruel prank. Tommy was her 8-year-old son, and there was no way anyone could have known about her private nickname for him. But the voice, it was identical to her own, just 20 years younger. The next morning, despite herself, Margaret kept Tommy home from school, claiming he had a fever. At exactly 9:45 a.m., a drunk driver lost control of his pickup truck and mounted the sidewalk on Elm Street, precisely where Tommy would have been riding his bicycle. The accident killed 2 other children instantly. This was only the beginning of Margaret's nightmare. Over the next 15 years, the calls came sporadically, but with terrifying accuracy. Always from the same rotary phone in her kitchen. Always from her past self, warning about tragedies that would unfold exactly as predicted. Her voice from 1974 warned about a gas leak that would have killed her neighbor's family. Her voice from 1976 prevented her from attending a concert where a stage collapsed, crushing 12 people. Her voice from 1978 saved her marriage by warning about her husband's affair before it could destroy their family completely. But here's where the story takes a truly macabre turn. Margaret realized that every tragedy her past self warned her about were events that had already shaped her life in the most fundamental ways. The drunk driving accident that killed those children, it had happened. Her neighbor's family had died in the gas explosion. She had attended that concert and survived only by a miracle when the stage came down. Her husband had cheated, and their marriage had ended in bitter divorce. Margaret began to understand that she wasn't preventing these tragedies. She was living through them twice. First in reality, then as warnings from a past that somehow knew they were coming. The calls became more frequent and more disturbing. Her voice from 1979 warned about Tommy's appendicitis, giving her the exact time to call the ambulance. Her voice from 1981 told her about the car accident that would leave her with a permanent limp. Her voice from 1983 warned about her mother's stroke, down to the minute it would occur. Each call was a reminder of pain she had already endured, tragedy she had already survived, loss she had already mourned. Margaret began to realize that her past self wasn't trying to save her future self. Her past self was trapped, forced to watch the horrors unfold and scream warnings into a void that had already happened. Margaret's journals reveal her growing obsession with understanding the calls. She tried everything, changing her phone number, moving to different houses, even destroying the phone entirely. But the calls always found her. Sometimes through payphones when she was out shopping, sometimes through neighbors' phones, ringing at the exact moment she walked by. Once, memorably, through the intercom system at the library where she worked. The voice was always hers. Always younger, always desperate. The most chilling entry in Margaret's journal dates to October 19, 2003. The call came at 3 a.m. It was me, from 1968, when I was only 22 years old. She was crying, which she never does. She said, "Margaret, I can see you writing this. I can see you reading this. I'm watching you right now, and I need you to know that it never ends. The calls never stop. Even after you die, you'll still be making them. Because time isn't a line, Margaret, it's a prison, and we're all trapped in it together." This entry reveals the true horror of Margaret's situation. She wasn't just receiving calls from her past self. She was simultaneously making them trapped in a temporal loop where every moment of her life was being lived and relived infinitely. Margaret's neighbors reported that in her final years, she would often be seen talking to her kitchen wall for hours, carrying on conversations with someone who wasn't there. When they asked about it, she would say she was coordinating with the other Margarets to make sure all the warnings were delivered on time. The truly disturbing part, Margaret's warnings were becoming increasingly accurate and increasingly specific. She began receiving calls about events that hadn't happened yet in her timeline, but which her past self somehow knew were coming. Her voice from 1965 warned about the 9/11 attacks for months before they happened. Her voice from 1972 gave her the exact date of her own death, according to the final entry in her journal. Margaret's past self called one last time, on December 12, 2008. The voice was that of a child, maybe 7 years old. It was her from 1953, and all it said was, "Margaret, I'm so tired, can we please stop now?" Margaret Holloway was found dead in her kitchen on December 13, 2008, slumped over her rotary phone. The coroner ruled it natural causes, a heart attack brought on by severe stress and chronic sleep deprivation. But here's what the official report didn't mention. The phone was off the hook. And according to phone company records, it had been in use for exactly 43 minutes when her body was discovered. 43 minutes, the exact length of time it would take to warn someone about every major tragedy that had shaped Margaret Holloway's life. The house was sold to a young family 6 months later. They reported no unusual phone calls, no strange voices, no warnings from the past. The rotary phone was donated to a local thrift store where it sits today, silent and waiting. But Margaret's story doesn't end with her death, because in 1993, in another timeline, in another reality, a younger Margaret is just now washing dishes when her phone rings for the first time. And the voice on the other end is older, tired, filled with the weight of knowing what's coming. "Margaret, this is you. This is you from 2008. I know you won't believe me, but you have to listen. Tomorrow, Wednesday, March 17th, don't let Tommy ride his bicycle to school." The loop continues. It always continues. Because time, as Margaret discovered, isn't a river flowing forward. It's a prison where every moment happens forever. And some people are doomed to live their tragedies not just once, but for all eternity. Margaret Holloway spent 40 years trying to save herself from a future that had already happened. In the end, she realized that the only escape from time isn't moving forward or backward. It's letting go entirely. And on that December night in 2008, with her hand on that rotary phone, Margaret finally found the courage to stop running from herself. The phone went silent. The warnings ended. And somewhere, in 1953, a 7-year-old girl named Margaret took her first breath, completely unaware that she was about to begin a life of impossible conversations with herself across time. But the real question remains. If you received a call tomorrow from your past self, warning about a tragedy that was about to unfold, would you listen? And more importantly, would you be strong enough to handle the knowledge that everything you're about to experience has already been lived, suffered through, and survived by the person you used to be? Because in Margaret's world, time wasn't about moving forward, it was about the courage to keep living the same horrors over and over again, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this time you might be able to save yourself. Sweet dreams.